So, as part of our Sunday sessions, we have the pleasure of artist Stanley Onah with us this evening. Stanley is one of our newest artists, or the latest artist to join the Adorn family. So we're absolutely delighted to have him here with us this evening to chat to us about his work, his practice, how he became a full-time artist now, and the journey to that point. So thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
So I guess I'll start with, so this is your second collection.
Yeah.
That
second
we
series,
have here with us.
Yeah.
Which has done very well.
Oh,
Between
it's been great.
The first exposure at Craft,
yeah,
and then kind of we continued that momentum here, and several of those pieces have all gone off to new homes. So a very successful start to your second collection. Tell me about the kind of influences and motivations behind that. Like, what was the point at where you were like, okay, this is where this is going to start?
In terms of the most recent series?
Yes, the most recent.
So started definitely last year summer, after I'd finished the small show I did for the first series. Usually at that point is when I start kind of experimenting with like possibly where I'm going to go next with a series of paintings. And at that point I was quite bored with sort of depicting reality as we see it every day. And I started to look at the work of artists that were sort of moving off that road of reality and doing some things not so much surreal, but things that just were a little more distorted and different.
Okay.
And so I started to play around with that, and I was just playing around with different techniques in the studio. Like that's where a lot of this stuff comes from, experimenting. There's a lot of failed paintings that people don't ever see, like loads.
Do they still exist?
Some,
or
a lot of them get painted over. Recycling materials, trying to make the most of it. Materials aren't cheap. So it was something that took a few months to develop, like playing around with things, and then I came about some, like a kind of visual language and aesthetic that I thought I wanted to explore further with the series, and that's where the whole series Altered State came from, which basically is a series of paintings depicting an imagined reality, very similar to our own, because I thought it was important that the audience could see some similarities, but so they could connect with it, but at the same time there were these elements that were quite different and made you curious about the work.
A dystopian version.
Yeah.
Okay.
Great way to describe it. Yeah. And I sort of used that imagined reality to explore other topics. So whether or not people believe in alternate realities, it was a way to pose the question that if they did exist, how would that make you feel?
What would it look like?
Yeah, and how would it make you feel about things like the idea of destiny, the notion of free will, the fundamental nature of our existence, and all these things. I just wanted to prompt those questions.
And are you quite a spiritual person? Does that guide your narrative?
I would say so. Yeah, I think over the years I've sort of lent more towards that. But I'm definitely someone who believes in multiple realities. I think there's so much more to this than we could ever comprehend. I don't think we'll ever get a glimpse of it. You could argue some people have got glimpses of it through different experiences.
Like a matrix.
Yeah. But I'm definitely in that camp.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so those notions and those thoughts in your head would definitely kind of guide you.
Oh, definitely.
The inception of the concept.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
And this particular collection, Altered States, is all oil
Yeah.
oil paintings.
Yeah.
Is that your preferred media? Has that always been the kind of practice that you adopt?
It's definitely the predominant medium I use. In my last series, I actually used a combination of acrylic and oil paints. What I would actually do with that series is I would lay a base in acrylic because I could do some really interesting textures and some sorts of effects with acrylics, and then do the oil painting on top. But with this series, it's strictly oil painting. Over the years, I've experimented with all sorts of mediums to find the medium that works best for me and what I'm trying to portray. And oils for me are just the ultimate boss. They're so flexible. You can do so much with them. They're just and the way they look when you lay paint down on whether it's linen or canvas or even paper, there's this richness to it that I just don't get with other paints. You can still get a really good finish with other paints, but for me personally, I just love the aesthetic it gives. Yeah.
You've created these paintings so precise and accurate. We've had people visit and kind of go, oh, I really like that silk screen print in the window. And well, actually, it's not a silk screen print, it's an oil painting, and they're quite shocked because of usually with oil, it's quite, it can be quite whimsical and quite, mesmeric
free
and
yeah,
free,
yeah,
exactly. Whereas you've chosen to use that material, but in a very precise,
and like
manner,
surgical,
which is great.
Which I think is a great contrast, like using oil paints to create an aesthetic like that. I think that really appeals to me.
And the subjects in these paintings, are they sitters or are they fabricated? Where are they taken from?
It's a combination. None of them are sitters. Hiring models these days is super expensive. But I feel like with what I do, I can make the most of found imagery, photo references. I often, to be honest, a lot of the work I will Frankenstein images together. I've always got a folder on my computer, a folder on my phone of just images. When I see something, I take a picture, or I see something online, I snapshot it, and then when I come to putting together a piece, I'll just have a session where I'm in Photoshop and I'm just bringing different elements together, sort of masking out elements of faces, bringing in other elements, and just Frankensteining an image together so I get something that compositionally I like, something where I've played around with the lights in the image and just found something that I can work with as a base, and then from there I will go on to further the concept with some drawing in Photoshop before sort of thinking, okay, how am I going to transfer this from Photoshop to oil painting? Because also going from the digital to the tactile itself, it's not going to come out exactly like for like. So I'm always bearing that in mind when I'm making things digitally, how it's going to transform in oil painting. But after doing it for so long, I sort of have an idea of how things will move and work. So, yeah.
And so painting for you it clearly comes very naturally because you never had a formal education in art. When did you first kind of pick up your brushes and go, I'm going to give that a go?
When I first picked up brushes, it would have been in secondary school, in year 10. Yeah, year 10, so that's just before year before the GCSEs. I took art for GCSEs, and that was probably the first time I picked up a brush. I obviously was doing stuff based on the school curriculum, which for GCSEs actually I did enjoy, even though for the GCSEs I sort of specified in photography. It wasn't actually painting. We could choose painting, photography. I think sculpture was one as well. I chose photography. I really enjoyed photography back then. We had our a little dark room, which was great. So we did the whole process from taking photographs on film and processing them in the dark room. That was like an amazing experience. But then going on to A level, I took art again, but I sort of got disillusioned at that point. Kind of fell out of love with the art, mainly the curriculum, what we were being taught, the artists we were studying.
And this, so do you feel that this kind of pause with the kind of motivation to create came because of the lack of freedom in the kind of education system?
Yeah, I definitely think so.
You weren't really allowed to express yourself.
I definitely feel that, and the thing is, it's not even, I'd want to make a case for your whole studying period. You should have that freedom, because I think there is place for formal study, 100%. I think it's necessary, but there should also be quite a large amount of that apportioned to free study and exploring your own ideas and your own sort of concepts that you want to bring to the fore.
Okay.
I think that's super important to even keep you motivated as an artist. I think that's super important.
And so from a teenager until now, it's been quite a gap in between. So like, what was going on in the middle?
Man, there was a few things going on. So after uni, I did business marketing at uni purely because I had no idea what I wanted to do. You go in, you think, business marketing, that can apply to everything. I'll do that. I did that while I was studying.
Has that kind of served a purpose at any point since you've done it? Have you been able to use what you learnt there within your kind of artistic career now? Is that
I think
played a part?
I think a little
Has it been
bit.
Useful?
A little bit. I'm not going to say much of it. A little in terms of understanding sort of the core functions of a business, like marketing, accounts, operations, sales. When you learn this sort of fundamentals of those things, it's very applicable to being an artist. Any artist needs to learn those things, especially in today's day. So
Why that though? Like, surely there was a lot of other things, or perhaps there were not a lot of other options to take. Is that why you kind of took that?
For why I'm studying business marketing.
Yeah.
Do you know what? There were loads of options. The problem was, and I feel it's still a problem today, is that young people aren't given the guidance to really think about what they want to do with their lives. You're put into this system where really it's more structured around preparing you to work for a company, preparing you to work for some kind of institution, when you're not really given guidance on trying to assess what are your strengths, what are the areas, because there's so many areas available, what are the areas where you have an interest? How do you combine your areas of interest with the areas where you're just naturally skilled in?
Or gifted.
Yeah. There just wasn't enough guidance on that, so just didn't think about it. That was it.
This was in the UK?
Yeah.
Okay.
You just get to the point to apply for your degree and you haven't given much thought to it at all. You're just like, oh, what do I do?
So you were booted out of uni. Once that was, not literally booted out, but you left that kind of chapter in your life.
Yeah.
And where did that take you?
From there, I ended up going into sound engineering, because when I was studying business marketing, I used to spend a lot of time in the studios. I had a friend who was studying commercial music, and we actually had some really good studios there. And I used to spend so much time in the studios with him, and I'd kind of learned the basics of recording and sound engineering. And I thought this is something that I really, really find interesting. So maybe a year after I finished uni, I started looking at sound engineering courses, did a diploma in sound engineering. It was a really, really cool course. I got to work with these massive consoles you'll see in these really good studios.
So this would be for music production?
Yeah.
Okay.
For music recording and production, yeah. So I did that as a really intense course for a year. Really great place. The studios were open 24 hours. So, I spent many mornings, late nights into mornings in there recording and engineering. Great fun. And then my plan was to get a job with one of the recording studios after. Problem was, around that time, a lot of the big studios were closing down because of all the advances in technology. you could buy equipment and produce really good close to studio quality sound at home, if not the equivalent. So there were less jobs for like runners and stuff. That's how you usually get into the studio. You start off as a runner, and so I struggled to find work there. But I did end up working with a post-production company in Soho. I'm not too sure if they're still around. They're called Stanleys. I did a small stint as a runner there, so I thought, well, try that out. But after doing that for a little while, I realised that post-production, because that was with film, I realised that post-production wasn't why I got into this, it was for the music. So I left that. I continued trying to carry on doing some freelance recording, sound engineering, and music production. And did that for a little while. It didn't really take off, but I kept at it. And then after a few years, I just thought, okay, you know what? You get to a point, like it was like my mid to late 20s, and I felt I need to start getting on with life. Like there's a lot of this other stuff, like sorting out a place to live and all these different things. So then I ended up focusing more on back into the property side of things, because that's what I was doing initially. And then I ended up training to be a chartered surveyor, did that. I honestly did that for a few years, and then after a few years realizing that this is not for me. And then, that's when eventually I fell back into art. So I've been up and down.
It'll always bring you back. Like I've had several different careers and incarnations. I've worked in hospitality, hotels, nightclubs. I've worked in hair salons, in retail, skincare. All of these. Some of them quite crazy environments to work in. And then after so long, like working for somebody else, kind of took a step back and kind of gone, actually, I'm a 40-something-year-old man. Like, what the fuck am I going to do? Like, what do I want? I want to, where am I going? Like, I'm doing all this stuff for other people, but I'm not really getting any joy for myself. So I kind of took a moment to like reassess the situation, and in doing so, picked up my brushes and started painting. And I suppose that creative outlet was almost like a cathartic release for me. I was just like, oh, okay, I feel at home here, creating or being surrounded by creativity, and and that's how Adorn was born. And then 5 years later, from doing little paintings and embroidering t-shirts and silkscreen printing, we've surrounded ourselves with over 40 amazing artists that have brought Adorn to life. So it can take a while, but if you give yourself a minute to really kind of think about it and step back, you get there. So you've almost
exactly.
you've come full circle with some
I definitely have.
interesting occupations
in
between. So like, I mean, so what's next? Like, you're working on a new collection right now.
Yes, I am. I'm very excited about it. I am working bigger. You're going to see some bigger pieces coming from me. Working on the concept is pretty firm, but I always leave a little room for movement, because often when you're producing a series, as you produce each painting, things can change a little bit, the trajectory just a little bit, but there is an umbrella concept around it. And I'm deep into that right now. Hoping to put on hoping to have everything finished early next year. Hopefully put on a show.
Spring show, everyone. You heard it here first.
And just see the next steps from there, because I think one thing I've realized on this artistic journey so far is it's great to have a general plan and to work towards that, but you shouldn't get too specific, because what you'll find is as you action things, other things will come up, new opportunities will come up, and you need to just kind of follow the momentum of things and move with it and see how things go. So,
but continue to create.
Yeah, always.
During that.
Yeah, always. I'm always creating, always.
So as someone that has found a kind of artistic success later on in life that hasn't necessarily pursued it from kind of leaving school? You've kind of taken various different avenues for you to reach this point. What kind of advice would you give to somebody that's kind of perhaps realised later in their life that this is what I want to do, or some kind of tips on how to kind of step into that arena later on?
I'd probably start with asking yourself, do you want to do this as a hobby, or do you want to do this as a living? I think that's a super important question you need to identify with yourself, because that's really going to set the path for where you go from there. So if it's something you just want to do as a hobby, you should just create. Make sure you go and see art. I always tell people who are into art, or artists themselves, because a lot of artists keep themselves stuck in the studio. It's so important to go to see exhibitions. It's just great to get out there and see other work. Also, it's so inspirational. You'll see little things that you think, look how they've done that, look how she's done this, I can borrow this, I can borrow that. It's so important. But if you want to pursue it as a living, I think you need to put a bit more of a serious cap on. And I would definitely suggest trying to join some kind of artist community where you can share ideas, you can get some critical feedback on your work, and also maybe finding a mentor that's so beneficial. They can really guide you in terms of maybe learning some fundamentals, because even though I didn't formally study art, I went out of my way to learn the fundamentals of mark making, of painting, composition, learning about lights, learning about hues. I think that's super, super important. So I would definitely recommend that. And also putting yourself out there, trying to attend artist workshops. Sometimes they can be a bit expensive, so if you can't do that, maybe go to your local life drawing class. Find local art get-togethers where maybe everyone's putting together some funds to hire a live model, something like that.
Any ones that you'd recommend in particular?
Ones that come to mind, I used to go to them a lot. There is an organisation called, is it Life? I can't remember the name, but every week they do life drawing classes in Waterloo. I'm sure if you just Google search life drawing Waterloo, it will come up. Cool bunch of people. When I used to go, I think it was like £15. It should be around that still. Yeah. It's just great to go and do like an hour session there. It's usually an hour and a half, and you do some quick sketches first. Then as you go through the session, you do like longer drawings, and it's just good for your own practice. Learning the fundamentals, hand-eye coordination, and drawing from there's no better way to improve your technique and improve your craft than painting or drawing from life. Even though it's very difficult, but it's the best. It's the best.
And do you, sorry, I've kind of just had a thought in my head. Do you, in that kind of transition, do you feel like you've had to, what things have you had to sacrifice to pursue this now, if any? And you may not have.
No, I definitely think so. I think time, deciding where you're going to commit your time, because the reality is, when I'm at home, I don't really watch TV. I spend most of my time either obviously creating, or maybe watching something related to creating, whether it be, it doesn't necessarily have to be something specifically painting. I could be watching something on sculpture, but it's still gonna be very informative to me, because there's so many things that can be translated into painting. And that really prioritizing what you want to do with your time, because we have a limited amount of time here, and you have to say to yourself, with this limited amount of time, how am I going to prioritize it to get the best outcome for what I'm trying to achieve? So time has been the biggest thing. I spend a lot of time dedicated to all aspects related to the art. And half the time it's not even making. It could be like having a quick search on, okay, what's the best way to market this? What's the best way to, figure out how to put on a show and organize the framing and all these little things that you don't think about when you think about, oh, I want to be an artist. There's all this other ancillary stuff that you've got to be aware of and know, and often as an artist you've got to do yourself because...
But also things that you might not necessarily learn in education anyway. You know, you've just got to wade in and figure it all out and like hit those hurdles and go, shit, what do I do now?
That's it. And that's kind of goes a little bit back to what I was saying earlier about what we're taught in schools. We're not really taught how to live in the world. We're given these subjects which we should all have a base in, which is good for sort of the basics of certain things. Like you should definitely know your fundamentals in maths and English, be able to communicate. When we start getting a bit specific, you know, it's more specific to the vocation, like, I don't know, being a doctor, being a solicitor. But in school, we should really be taught things like how to budget, how to sort out your self-assessment tax.
How to live. How to not get in debt.
What's a mortgage? What do they mean by it's this rate for this period? What does that mean? What's the variable interest rate mean? What does a fixed? All these things. Life. Do you know what I mean? But you just got to learn these things yourself.
Like it gets in the way. Life gets in the way.
That's it.
Of doing the fun stuff.
Honestly, it's like, get out of the way. We can do this fun stuff.
Well, look, it's been great to chat to you. Thank you so much. I'm sure this won't be the last time that we chat and that we can kind of share some nuggets of information.
Definitely.
You know, let's do this again when we see the new collection in
100%.
the spring. But before I let you go, I'm going to do something that we do with everybody here. It's a bit of a silly little game that I like to play to see if I can win it or not. Word association. You may remember this from Mallet.
Yeah.
Timmy Mallet as a kid. I knew you would.
I'm that old.
So I'm gonna kind of say a word, and you're gonna come back to me with a word that is similar or related, and we'll see how quick we can volley it. So I'm gonna start off with glass.
Smash.
Break.
Lunch.
Dinner.
Breakfast.
Milk.
Eggs.
Bacon.
Sausages.
Shit.
Toilet. I'm not sure if you were swearing or you were saying shit, but toilet.
I think you won.
One game winning streak. Thanks, Trevor.